Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I'm joined by Pratt Rogers for our weekly look at all things Ole Miss sports. How you doing, Pratt?
Man, I'm good. What's going on in your world?
Not a lot. I'm having to deal with some very petty, very whiny, very crybaby Penn State fans that still are going into my comments of my videos. And my whole thing is, A, it's not my responsibility who quit on your team. And B, it wouldn't have mattered because if we'd have wanted to score 50 points, we would have.
So probably all of that is true, but Steven, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I feel like you like the drama a little bit.
Hey, it helps me. It helps the view count. I mean, I'm not I like kicking anthills. I tell people all the time, I enjoy kicking anthills of opposing fan bases. I've done it with Auburn. I've done it with Tennessee. And whenever I saw that Penn State was like the 7th largest fan base out there, I'm like, yes, I'm kicking that anthill.
You may be that guy who's throwing bottle rockets in ant beds, so maybe a little more than just the casual kick or two. But I'm here for it. I want you to know that.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it is, I talked about everything. You were at the game, Pratt. You were there. You saw this. You did not see this though on TV at the end. Like in the third quarter, they'd show player shots on the sidelines of Penn State, and they just wanted to go home. They knew they had no chance of winning that game. You could see it in their eyes.
Well, look, Stephen, I know you and I touched base a little bit on the crowd. I was appalled that you made it sound like that it was such a heavy Ole Miss dominated crowd. I felt like there's a good bit of Penn State fans, but you could be right. You could be right. They may be leaving in the third and fourth quarter. Yeah.
Yeah. You also missed quite possibly the greatest gif that's going to be made because there was like a Penn State football mom that got caught on camera.
Don't worry, I saw that. Yeah,
yeah, it is. Yeah, whenever that happened and you saw it live on TV, you were like, "Oh yeah, that's going to live forever." And I love football moms.
Because, that went viral pretty quickly, and even people who I was with, we give them a hard time. Older crowd, technologically illiterate is the term we use, and dinosaurs maybe. My dad, he even saw that, and he's like, "Okay, if I'm seeing that, this is definitely viral."
Yeah. Yeah, it was hilarious. I was like, well, that woman's going to be known forever because she just couldn't believe what happened. And, you had a situation to begin the game, and the script for Penn State was actually pretty good. They were doing some stuff and letting Ole Miss kind of run out in formation stuff to gash Ole Miss in the first drive. Once that stopped and once Pete Golden kind of just went to a base defense, nothing real over the top, Penn State couldn't do anything on offense. I mean, just a bad offensive team.
Steven, I don't know if that's credit to Golding because the people we were with were very quick to point out that first drive. I mean, we all kind of looked at each other and we were like, oh boy, this could be a 40-0 day. We kind of settled down. They hit that field goal, but I don't know if it's a credit to Golding for second half adjustments or anything like that. But I felt like it was really, really well coached game.
Yeah, it was adjustments real quick on the fly from Golding because that first drive, there was a lot of defensive line movement. And whatever Penn State was doing, they could pick up which direction we need to run against the slant to where the defensive line was going the other way. And there would be holes wide that you could run a Mack truck through. After the first drive of the game, after the first or second drive of the game, whenever that was, Pete Golding just said, okay, we're just going to play base defense. Typical 11th grade Mississippi 4A football and just beat them. And Penn State couldn't run the ball anymore.
Well, look, let them figure it out. If that's what they know, let them do it that way. Yeah, I was very worried after the first Penn State drive. I thought this was going to be a long day, and ended up being a great day though, and it was something I'll never forget, and it was a blast.
So how were your seats? How was actually being at the Peach Bowl?
So I wish I knew our seat numbers or where we were. If and I don't know if what you could tell on TV or not, but the way the stadium sits, it was almost one of the end zones was Ole Miss dominated, and it almost looked like a young student section crowd, so to speak. I was right on the edge of that, teetering on the Penn State section. I got to say, we were right on the borderline of the end of the end zone, probably the corner of the end zone. So yeah, it was. We were sitting next to Penn State people. Actually, to our left, to our right was Ole Miss people. So it was. We were kind of in uh, that dividing line section, so to speak. But man, I'll tell you what, the Penn State people were great. I think all of us came away and said, really classy group, and everybody was really nice to be around. I enjoyed meeting the people in our section. Really, just genuinely good people, and yeah, I had a blast. I did notice one thing, Steven. It was an older crowd, and I don't know if that's like the Joe Paterno era, mentality of Penn State, but there's a lot of older fans there. It wasn't a young demographic that at least that we were around.
Yeah, and most fan bases most that travel to games, you're not going to have a problem with those people because they all understand if you go someplace looking for trouble when you're traveling, you're going to find that trouble.
For sure.
And yeah, and you kind of get accustomed to doing it. So the people that are in my comment section are probably going to comment on this video, probably not the same people that were in the stadium, because I heard nothing but good things about the Penn State people that anybody has dealt with that were at the game. Now, part of that might be the fact that it got out of hand so quickly, you almost had to do it. There's no smugness that can happen. But, if you go there, if you go to the game, you're going to have a decent experience, I think, especially a bowl game.
Yeah, the one thing that I did think was kind of funny, the lady sitting in front of me was a Penn State fan, and she had her text font on like size 80. So I wasn't obviously overlooking or trying to read her text, but she did send out a text to like 20 people asking about the game, and it said, Ole Miss girls all look the same, blonde hair, red lipstick, period. And I started like dying laughing. So if that's a derogatory term, I don't know, but that was definitely a laugh out loud for everybody around her.
So what are your takeaways from the game? Other than the very beginning of the game, what were your takeaways from the football game?
Takeaway from the game, I would say, Stephen, I think maybe a podcast or two ago that you and I did, I think we mentioned a little bit of reservations on the offensive line. And I think we described other positions being elite. And I think we came back and said offensive line is not one of those positions, but a good position group. And I think they kind of answered the call. This week, this was an elite defensive line. And for us, it took us a while to kind of get settled, but for us to really step up and answer the call, I thought that was really impressive to me. And I thought that's what won the game, frankly.
Yeah, and Jackson Dart, by the way, who has announced that he is coming back for his senior year, junior, whenever it is, he's coming back. And he's going to be a Heisman contender. Ole Miss is going to be in a contention for a national title. Hosting a playoff game is probably the goal. And you just sit here and you think it's like, you almost feel bad. You're like, okay, I'm going to jinx all of this stuff. But, maybe this team just has that kind of talent, man.
Well, look, if we're a 10-win season this year, with the pieces that we're reloading, even just looking at it at an elementary level, we're a better team next year. And that's, I think, why everybody's looking through that scope, Steven, is we're not losing anybody, and we're upgrading at almost every position. So it's hard not to be optimistic. It's hard not to feel that way right now. I'm all in. I told somebody this weekend, I said, I am chugging red and blue Kool-Aid.
Yeah, and they're not done. The transfer portal is not closing. Now, on what day is that? Wednesday, the transfer portal closes. But that is just to get into the transfer portal, not to be able to sign. Ole Miss does most of their work in the transfer portal between January 15th and February 1st. That's happened both of the years. That's when Jackson Dart was signed. Everybody remembers that. Ole Miss is going to be hosting a visitor. They're opening up the dead period for a couple of days for mid-year enrollees to visit. Cole Rusk, a tight end from Murray State, an FCS All-American, is going to visit. And everybody's going to be like, oh, wait, Caden Prescorn just had a day. He's amazing. No, this is Lane Kiffin is going to try and recruit you to the bench, and it doesn't matter who you are.
Well, the thing that stuck out with me is I'm sure y'all saw on TV, Hudson Wolf got in the game and had some playing time. Is that a play towards Hudson Wolf, so to speak? Is that saying, hey, man, we're not 100% confident in his health issues? Or is that just a necessary depth piece? That's kind of what stuck out to me in that tight end visitor, Stephen. But yeah, that was kind of my one notation on it.
Yeah, you have the back stuff with Hudson Wolf, and then this year he broke his collarbone and missed 6 games this year. So yeah, he's kind of in show me mode. So if Hudson Wolf can get on the field next year and play, good for him. But it'll be nice that the backup to Caden Prescorn is not Javante Connor or Dylan Hipp.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And probably just looking at that as a necessary depth piece is probably the correct way to look at that. I just didn't know if that signified that, hey, Hudson Wolf, you've been here a while now, and, it's not your fault that you haven't produced. You've just been unhealthy, but, time to step up and make a play. And I hate using that term because that's the wrong way to phrase it, Stephen, to be honest with you, but I don't have a better explanation.
Yeah, this morning's show, basically I did 4 names that Ole Miss fans needed to watch, and I'm not going to, go back over those again. If you want those names, you can go to the other video. But there was one name that literally came out 5 minutes after I recorded my show. We will talk about that one. It's Lance Hurd from LSU. He went into the transfer portal. He was a 5-star offensive lineman out of Monroe, Louisiana. He apparently has a good relationship with Pete Golding. Ole Miss was the first school that offered him. He went to LSU because kids in Louisiana go to LSU, but
they all do.
Yeah, it appears that he's on the Walker Howard track a little bit. LSU people are saying there's a good chance he ends up at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is recruiting him along with Colorado. That seems to be the competition in this recruitment. You have to like Ole Miss's chances with the national title buzz and all that going on. That would be a big pickup to go beside Jerquan Scott. And the offensive line would kind of be there, honestly.
Well, look, my understanding too, Stephen, this isn't a guy that while he's this would be a true sophomore, correct? I mean, my point is he's a young guy, but I think he started or played in almost every game last year for LSU. So, I mean, this is a guy with experience. And that's what Kiffin and Golding and everybody on the Ole Miss recruitment side of things evaluates. It's experience. And while he doesn't have that 4th-year experience that some of these guys have been targeted for, he isn't just a 5-star high school player that hasn't seen any meaningful reps yet.
Yeah, and also if you look at it, he's 6'6", 340 pounds. He's basically Micah Pettis. And so this Lane Kiffin staff and Charlie Weiss Jr. and all that, they have a type on the offensive line, and that type is road graders and run blockers, and we'll figure out a way to scheme it open to where we can throw the ball and pass the ball. But they're trying to find road graders, and I mean, that's pretty obvious to me.
Well, look, it totally makes sense when you've got a guy like Quinshon in the backfield who's run for almost, let's say, 2,800 yards in 2 seasons, if that's right, 1,200 and 1,600 roughly, something like that. I mean, totally makes sense. I mean, I think I spoke to you about, I said, we've just got to go spend the rest, whatever we've got left in NIL, go dump it into offensive line. Doesn't matter how good or great, we just have too much talent on offense to let 2024's team be potentially bastardized by lack of offensive line movement. I mean, I get it that's probably a biased opinion, but the O-line is so important, and we have so many weapons. It would just be a colossal waste not to have some really big dudes back there.
So, how are you going to handle the next 9 months leading into football season? All of this hype, all of this talk. How are you going to handle it? Because you're more negative than I am, and I'm not calling you negative. I'm just saying you're more negative than me.
Steven, so negative, I don't love the term negative, but I completely understand what you mean by that. Cautious, maybe how I would define it myself, but to answer your question, I'm all in, and that's the problem. You don't want to get your hopes up, but I'm totally all in. And yeah, over the next 9 months is just doing more of this, catching up on football through social media outlets or podcast, whatever that may be, to try to get your daily fix of it. I mean, same as you, of course. And honestly, I think the fun part kind of starts during this time. You can kind of reset, check out game film or, of prospects or practice film. And this time of the year starts catching up with, hey, look, this guy's a young guy. He did really well in practice this week and during spring ball. That stuff's kind of cool to me for sure.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun for everybody to go through, because I told people, and I said something on one of my podcasts earlier in the week. You're going to run into fans that are but fans. It's like, okay, this person did this, but and something like that, and that's okay. That's just them trying to process and have fun anyway. Don't let them affect your fun, because they're just trying to basically translate this and figure out in their mind what's going on.
So sorting it out mentally is half the battle.
Yeah. And especially whenever you got the scar tissue of being what an Ole Miss fan has been for the last 40 years.
I will say, while I am cautious, I'm 100% confident in Kiffin. I mean, I've never been as more confident in anybody as I have been in Kiffin this upcoming year. I mean, he's made it apparent in every way possible that he's all in, and that makes you want to be all in as the fan, or in your case, the media. Everybody wants to be all in when you feel as if your leader's all in.
And just realize, all the fans need to realize, this all in the transfer portal feels orchestrated with who they are going after. Lane Kiffin has targeted everybody, has gotten just about everybody that he has targeted. And so if they come up, he's got this figured out. So if you're worried about a specific area, he's got a plan for that too, because there's somewhere there's in the war room. I remember whenever I worked for Coach Orgeron in 2006, they had a whiteboard with magnets up there, and it was a depth chart of prospects going down. So, if somebody said no, they got taken off the board and everything got moved up. There's nobody coming off the board right now.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin's getting everybody he wants to get. And if he gets this Lance Hurd character right here, the offensive line, like I said, is kind of good to go. And we'll see through spring practice. Season tickets are going to sell out. There's probably going to be 20, 30,000 people at the spring game. I'm not calling a sellout in that one. But yeah, I think season tickets are going to sell out really, really quickly.
Steven, I was talking to somebody yesterday, or I guess it was New Year's Eve a few days ago, about the 4-game season ticket pass. We used to always do that. Is that no longer an option? Somebody told me that was no longer an option. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, it's the it's like you can get 2 conference game and 2 non-conference games.
That's it.
Yeah, they did that last year. I do not know if they're doing it this year. Okay,
somebody had kind of asked me about it, and I said, I buy them. Those are typically what I've done in the past. And I was a little surprised to hear that those may be off the market, but I would be surprised if they were.
Before we get out of here, something that's really cool. And my whole life, we always looked at the schedule and was like, oh, that's a good schedule, or that's a bad schedule. Like if you got LSU at home and Alabama at home, it's like, oh, that's a great home schedule. And then if they were on the road and you end up with Arkansas and Mississippi State, and it's like, oh, Okay, that's not that very good. Well, this
Yeah.
year is the first time in my life that I can remember. It just doesn't matter what the schedule is because the team that everybody's going to be going there to see is actually Ole Miss. That's pretty
That
cool.
is a crazy perspective that I would never have thought of on my own. I love that mentality.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like it doesn't matter what Ole Miss's schedule is at home because Ole Miss is the team. Ole Miss is the Alabama that is the we're playing Georgia in Oxford, but Georgia is going to be excited to play that game on the road. It's going to be neat. But yeah, it's as somebody that's been an Ole Miss fan as long as I have, and my first game was Steve Sloan's last in Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium, Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Ken Austin was the quarterback. That game was my first game that I went to, and I went through all of the 80s, and the 80s were rough. There was a couple Independence Bowls in there. 90s, it got a little bit better, and it got a little bit better in the 2000s. It just incrementally got better over the next 40 years, and now we're at the point where, I mean, it's like I say all the time, next year's here, man.
Next year is here. Look, I'm not a huge, New Year's Eve guy or New Year's Day. I make a few personal resolutions or whatever, but kind of my big takeaway is exactly what you said. Next year is here. It's 2024. It's time to go.
Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Pratt Rogers, thank you so much for joining us, man. We'll talk to you next week, bud.
Can't wait. See you, man.
All right.